Greetings, family. Welcome to the Grand Rising Collective. My name is Kyle Dixon, co-host, educator, and entrepreneur for 20 years. Grand Rising Collective's here is to cultivate greatness in ourselves and our community.
And my name is Kayode Bentley, co-host, educator, and entrepreneur for over 20 plus years. My contribution to Grand Rising Collective is to help cultivate that greatness in ourselves and the community through impactful discussions, seminars, and webinars with my co-host, Kyle Dixon. There you go, Kyle.
Indeed. Greetings, family. Welcome back to another edition of the Grand Rise Collective podcast. I am here, one of your co-hosts, esteemed host, Kyle Dixon, along with my other co-host, my partner in podcast, Kayode Bentley. Say what's up to the people, Kayode.
What's up to the people? What's up, family? What's up, community? Thank you for joining us. We got another one today. Cal is going to introduce Dr. Allen. So, as usual, we're excited. We're ready to go.
Indeed, family. So this is going to be a very, very enriching conversation we're going to have today, family. We have an esteemed guest here, a family member of mine, actually, Dr. Reverend Fred Allen, right? So, as I affectionately call you, but Dr. Allen, for this interview, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Kyle and County, and it's as I said to you earlier, it's a privilege to be a part of this discussion tonight. I think it's very, very critical that we have this kind of engagement and to address some of the issues that you and I have discussed prior to the podcast.
Yes.
Good to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming. Family, we want to have this conversation. It is Black History Month, but we know Black History Month is every day. But I wanted us to have this conversation because not only him being a relative of mine, but he's been very much in the community, definitely a person of Christian faith, definitely someone who's been a leader within the churches, the Methodist community, and also just with being an older relative, an older man that has lived through America, lived through many different things. And I wanted us to be able to connect to our different generations. So with Grand Rise Collective, we interview people from all over, from many walks of life, from many age groups. And it's really about us really connecting with various generations to see where we've gone, where we are, and where we can go. All right. So with this conversation, definitely you're in for a treat tonight. Yeah, definitely in for a treat. So I want to go right in. Dr. Allen, respectfully, give us a little bit of background on you, growing up in the South, coming from, Tennessee, where I'm from as well, and just kind of give people a bit of background of just what kind of things happened with you growing up that kind of led you into your profession.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Let me first of all say that the title is not that important, so you can refer to me as Cuz or Fred.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with that, and
okay.
I'll start by just simply saying that growing up in the South in Nashville, Tennessee, was quite an experience, and it still is. My background, my parents, very closely knit family. We had I have 6 siblings, 2 of which have passed on and transitioned. 2 great parents, my mother and father, both deceased, but very, very influential in my life, as you can only imagine. And you know that, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
But not only my parents, but my grandparents on either side, my mother's father and mother, and my father's mother and father. Very, very faithful, committed, dedicated followers of Jesus Christ, very committed to the church. They've always been, in their day, very active. And I guess I would define active in terms of social activism in a way that was a little different than the social activist role that I played as a young adult and even as a teenager. But the community, I'll go back to that. The community was very, very strong. The cliche, it takes more than a person to raise a child. It's necessary that we have the whole village. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my experience, there was a village, and it's not a cliche. It was a fact that we always had eyes on us from somewhere, members of the neighborhood and the community, and the parameter probably in terms of people that I knew personally, and they knew me personally, and the family had some engagements one way or the other. Sometimes it would be social, sometimes it would be a church gathering, picnics, that kind of thing. So the neighborhood was very closely knit, and they all had hands and eyes and love and compassion and concern for all of the children in the neighborhood. I felt that. And I think without that kind of nurturing, without that kind of embracement of those families and those individuals, and I would start with members of the community that had very little or no formal education, but had a heart and a passion and compassion and a sense of what it meant to be liberated, to be free, what it meant to be an advocate for justice and righteousness, etc. I mean, all of those kind of combination of concerns and issues, and the manifestation of how they demonstrated, that commitment not only to me but to my other siblings and to other kids in the neighborhood. So it was a very rich experience, one that I will always be indebted to. As I said earlier, I would not be whatever I am. It would not be the case if it were not for those hands and those hearts and those prayers, those measures of discipline. In some cases, from my mother's home, my mother and father's home, out to the neighbors, to the school, and to the church. Church was extremely important. As far back as I can remember, I've always been a part of the church. And of course, being a Methodist, we were christened even as a child, meaning that my parents followed the tradition of Methodism and dedicated, if you will, or at least committed my life and committed themselves to surround me in a environment where morals and values were utmost. The priorities of our lifestyle, of our family, etc. And so the church played a tremendous part, and I can still remember some of the great saints that men and women that would have a commitment to teach us what the biblical understanding and how we would integrate the biblical theological into the social and the psychological elements of our lives, even as a small child growing up, having those kind of elements deeply rooted within my spirit, within my soul, and to be exposed to that on a daily basis. Not one day did we go without having that kind of influence one way or the other. And I'll just say a word about school teachers as well, because my early elementary school teachers were also my Sunday school teachers.
Oh, wow.
And so I had kind of a double privilege of being nurtured by my formal educator as well as my Sunday school teacher, who would impress upon all of us the necessity and the importance of being biblically sound, theologically sound as you possibly could, and how those elements would be integrated into a sociological, psychological part of our lives as well. So, there was a real advantage of having both the spiritual nurturing as well as the social and the parental nurture that I experienced, and my family and my siblings experience. I know I'm being a little redundant, but I'll never forget all of the wonderful experiences that I had growing up in the South, in Nashville, during a time and an era of segregation, and we had to go through a lot of difficult times. And yet, it was amazing. And this is not unique probably for me, but as poor as we were, I never knew that I was a poor person or that we grew up in a poor family.
Yeah.
We always felt very blessed and always felt very fulfilled in every respect.
Thank you for sharing that, because I appreciate that, because I never knew about the part of the elementary school teachers also being your Sunday school teachers. I never knew that aspect, and that holds a different dynamic and perspective on their reason for being an educator. You know me, I've been an educator for 20 plus years, and I have a deep purpose in that of service to our people. And I see in our family lineage, actually on you and my dad were like brothers. And
Right.
also, even on my mom's side, we have I see how our families connect in regard to that. We have a deep respect and love for service and education. Like I see that kind
Yeah,
of.
and if I may just interject,
Yes.
a wonderful tradition, an ethos within the Black community, within my experience, a tremendous reverence for the elders of our community. And I'm not just speaking about my parents, but the elders in general. We had a tremendous respect for them. Even it was amazing. Even the quote unquote the winos on the corner, men and women who were older and elderly. We had even a respect for them because we recognized that even in the state of the mentality that they were experiencing, they had wisdom and they had love and concern for all of the kids in the neighborhood. I mean, there were times when we would make jokes around, of them, but
Hmm.
deep down, we had a tremendous sense of respect, for all of our elders, period. And
Hmm.
that was something that was drilled into us, drilled deeply, that we must respect our elders, we must give them the love and the respect and the dignity of what it means to be a human being, to be a child that would be nurtured, by all of the various elements. And because all of the elements had a role to play, believe it or not, uh, men and women who had been incarcerated, men and women who were, unfortunately, some were alcoholics, etc. They still had a role and they had impressions and they had some influence in our lives. Not the dominant necessarily, but they all did. And the point that I'm just simply making is that we had a real sense of reverence and esteemed respect for our elders because we believed and we saw where many, if not all of them, contributed one way or the other. And over time, you begin to realize and understand sometimes people are victimized by the environment, victimized by the system, and victimized by the imbalance and the lack of reciprocity that some of them went through that even in my generation did not have to go through. So the suffering and the sacrifices that many of them made on behalf of us. And sometimes it didn't turn out to be as fortunately in terms of, career or resources or it being educated, etc.
Hmm. Okay, thank you for that. I know, Kyle, I know you got questions. Kyle.
Brother, I'm just being educated over here. I'm just not. I'm being serious because I don't. Not Dr. Allen. He's okay with Fred. So
Yeah,
Fred
good.
doesn't mind saying Fred. But no, what crossed my mind was, and I know you know this already. It's redundant, but the articulation in which you speak, you sound like a professor. You sound like an educator, and that's awesome. And I think that's definitely what's needed. One thing I want to bring out real quick as I build up to the question is I winos on the corner. Now I know we had winos on the corner here in the city, Harlem and stuff like that, but I didn't know there were winos on the corner down south. There were
Oh
winos on.
yeah.
I,
Oh yeah.
what kind of corner do y'all have? I know y'all. I know the corners here is like the wine stores, the liquor stores, and stuff like that. You got the corner, but in the South, they're houses. I mean, so I just thought that was interesting. I just wanted to bring that up. So thank you so much, Fred, for sharing that. And there's really nothing more I can add to it except to say that I wish we had that kind of reverence and respect for our elders today. It's really a sad state and time in which we live. Um, with that said, let me go here to this. We have a lot of black schools and organizations, a lot more than we had back during the civil rights movement, right? Proliferation, if you want to call it that. But with all these black schools and organizations, why does it seem like we as a culture are going in reverse?
Mm.
Well, I'm not sure if we're going in reverse as much as we are not exposed to the kind of frequency of our kids, of our adults that are still hungry and thirsting and desiring and have an ambition to be impacted by the educational system that we have. And we know There's a difference between what happens in the public school system over against the private school system and vouchers and so forth and so on. There seems to be um, a lack of appreciation for our schools and our Black institutions. But I think there's a reason for that appearance because we now have such an exposure through social media. We have competition with other opportunities of going to schools that in the future or in my generation were closed and not permitted for us to be a part of. And I think there's kind of a scatteredness of lack of focus on what happens in our community. You mentioned Harlem. I lived in Harlem for a while there and understand, how the neighborhoods and how close the neighborhoods are and the stores and so forth and the people who are on the corners, etc. But my point is that I still believe that the schools and the Black institutions are critically important and vital. And in some respect, I think they get a bad scorecard, if you will, because I think if we did some really in-depth research comparatively, I think we would see that the impact that our school systems, our institutions, our fraternities and sororities, et cetera, they're still making a tremendous influence and impact on the lives of our young adults, of our young students. Now, unfortunately, I believe that, as I said a moment ago, because of social media, because of the accessibility to so much news so quickly, that we're kind of inundated with all of these negative things. And at least from my perspective, the news media will pick up negative realities much so than they will for positive things that are happening in our school systems. We're still in a situation where reciprocity does not exist. I know that still in many of our schools, particularly in the urban communities, where school teachers are underpaid, resources and equipment are not made as nearly as available and accessible as some of the other suburban schools and institutions are. And so there's a drain, there's a real drain on our institutions. It's a real drain on our school systems in the public school system. And of course, if we look at the landscape politically today, we still see the effort of the racist kind of attempts to discredit, to diminish, to, in fact, in some ways, just to eliminate and to destroy the validity of what our school systems have done. I take my hat off. I've been tutoring some now during my retirement. And my wife, Christine, as you are, Kyle, in the educational system. And I did not have the appreciation for what a teacher has to go through until I started trying to tutor, starting with my youngest granddaughter and some of the other Black kids. And they are in a predominantly white school at this point. But we've taken, at least I have taken the initiative to try and pour into Lauren, my granddaughter, and other young children as much as I possibly can. And I must confess that some of the methodologies are far beyond the kind of tools that we had in learning and maturating. And so I have to put forth a lot of effort just to kind of keep up with the math and the science and the etc. And I'm just saying all of that in comparison to what happens in the predominantly white school setting, opposed to what happens in a predominantly Black school setting or an institutional setting. I mean, we can go to the financial institutions, we can go to the educational institutions, we can go to the medical institutions, etc. There is still a discrepancy there in terms of what resources are made available, how it's exposed, what reports come out to actually give the results of the good and the bad. And I'm not saying that we're perfect, but I'm saying that there is still an effort and a commitment on the part of our professionals, and they're not all at the same level. So I'm simply saying that I think that the importance and the necessity of embracing our Black institutions. I'll give you an example. I am a board member of the Tennessee State University Wesley Foundation, which is a Christian organization where we invite students to come and engage in dialogue, to engage in creativity in terms of doing Bible study, looking at some of the current events, looking at some of the political realities, etc. I see our students just as committed, but we have to have kind of a supplemental element to our institutions in order to have our kids to experience some of what we experience in our community, where, as I mentioned, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes.
And we can't just depend upon the formal structure of the institution to do it alone. We need to put pastors and social workers. We need psychiatrists and psychologists. We need street folk. We need all kind of elements into these institutions to help our kids and young adults to have a holistic understanding of what the community is all about and to claim the rich culture and the rich tradition of our community and not be deceived by some of what we hear and some of what we read about the negative reports about what our school systems and institutions are doing. I mean, I'm saying a lot, and I'm not necessarily saying that you need to agree with that,
Right.
but that's my perspective, and I embrace it strongly, and try to encourage. And that doesn't mean that I would not advocate for our young people, our young students to look at every opportunity they have to maximize and optimize their maturation and their growth and meeting their career goals, wherever it may be, but not to exclude the possibility of having the rich experiences that are unlike any other white institution or other institution that can really cultivate and nurture a Black student or a Black community like the Black community in the Black school can. My teachers, I've always and will always be indebted to them, as I said earlier. Anyway, that was a long response
But
to your statement.
thorough, yeah, thorough response. Because I mean, you said a lot in that, and it makes me think of like some of our listeners and some of the things that concepts that I have struggled with, or may currently struggle with, and some of them as well in regards to, the Black experience. And you may grow up in a Black neighborhood, but there's nothing like going to like a HBCU or a Black school or school
Right.
mostly ran by a Black administration who actually care for the students, who actually nurture the students into inherent skill set, like Kayode talks about a lot with his organization, 4Ts, teaching teens to think. So my question is, in regard to teaching the formal skill sets or the formal structure of education, why is it, and I think you may have already answered it, but why is it that they lack a lot of that purposeful reasoning for being educated? And what I mean by that is, it seems like our students our children, our kids are being taught like the math, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, but when it comes to sense of self, it seems to lack in that. And do you have any comment on that? Like, because me and Kayode talk about that a lot.
If I understand you correctly, are you saying that some of our young people have lost a sense of pride, a sense of dignity, um, and what it means to be a valuable contributor to the society by going through a process that they can really make that contribution in ways that perhaps my generation, my parents' generation did not make. So we've lost kind of sight, or the focus of the priority may be different. Again,
Yes.
and I think you're right, and that's a really deep concern
Mhm.
because I think we have too many of our young folk that are victimized by just being sidetracked,
Mhm.
if you will. I think instant kind of gratification has taken over some of what it means to be there for the long haul and the need for the sacrificial act on the part of what it means to be a good, grounded, holistic thinking individual, that we've been kind of trapped in this small myopic environment that says that maybe education is not that important. I think the competition, and I don't mean to say that, drug addiction and alcoholism and other forms of socialization that occur, even violence, for an example.
Mm-hmm.
In the Black community, we see a higher percentage of Black on Black crime today, I think. I think we see more young African American men being murdered by other African American men than we have in the past. And that's a real concern. And how do we stop that? But again, the educational design. See, it was an expectation,
Mm-hmm.
Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a doubt in my mind after I got into high school, maybe even before that, junior high school and middle school, that education was just something that was expected. In spite of the fact that, the parents and most of our parents didn't have the resources, but they made the sacrifice somehow. And I still don't know how my mother and father was able, and of course your parents as well,
Mm-hmm.
was able to provide us with an education. There were seven of us. Four of us completed uh, 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 completed college,
Mm-hmm.
and three of us went to postgraduate school, etc.
Mm-hmm.
On a very limited uh, pool of resources that our parents did not have. And somehow they managed to do that, although we contributed as well. But the focus was it's an expectation that you've got to get educated, you've got to get equipped. The competitive reality of what we are exposed to, and it's not a joke, you've got to be better than the counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to get better is to invest and to make a commitment in the educational system, be the best you can. The old army,
Right.
be the best you can.
Yeah.
And that was just an expectation. We didn't have a choice in many respects that I'm not going to go to school. I'm not going to strive to. And in fact, after I graduated from high school, and this would be the case for several of my peers. Started out in college, and for the first 2 years, perhaps we did okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ran out of money, had to drop out, work full time, then come back. At least that was my case.
Yeah.
Some of it was fooling around too. My freshman year, I had a ball.
Right. Hey, college,
Uh,
great.
but I simply think that the community, the leaders, we have a responsibility now to begin to reclaim the necessity. If it's not college or if it's not, you know, a university career, it may have to be uh, a trade.
Mm-hmm.
The point in pushing our kids to understand that to compete in this world, you've got to have some specialized training. You've got to have training beyond what you pick up in high school or what you pick up in the community. So, that's my view on that. And I've tried to say to my children and to mold and to guide them in that same direction that my expectations for them has always been you've got to go to school, you've got to be equipped and well equipped in order to compete and have a good, decent, wholesome life that would provide you with the resources
Mm-hmm.
that you would want to have.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you.
Fred, you threw a lot in there, man,
Mm-hmm.
and I tend to do that too when I speak, Cal. So I can't. I'm gonna do my best to try and you know, um, parse it, I guess, if that's the right word. Especially since we're dealing with a community today that we're trying to motivate, uplift, and inform. Okay, so there are a couple of things that um, wow, I want to bring up in regards to black schools compared to white schools. Oh, let me first start off by saying, Fred, I don't think Fred even knows my background. Okay, I don't think I shared that with him.
Yeah, no, no.
No, I
He's like,
don't
yeah. He's
know.
like, who is this guy? What are
Yeah.
you talking about? All right, so my name is Kayode Bentley, and I'm the president, as Cal said, of an organization, youth development organization called 4Ts, which stands for Teaching Teens to Think. And our
Mm,
goal is to help inner city youth from the community identify what they do naturally. In other words, their inherent skill set,
Mhm.
and then align that to education, because there's a disconnect with the formal education. These students are going to school and they don't realize what they're going to school for. So if they feel like, if they are able to discover what they do naturally and they're able to line it up to their education, the chances of them valuing their education and excelling in their education increases. And that's what we
mm,
do. So I help them
mhm,
do that into their post education, which is college, and then on to a career, ultimately, hopefully, starting a business. So that's what I
mm,
do with my organization.
mm,
I'm also an adjunct professor at Fordham University, and I also sit on the advisory board, Fordham University here in the city, of course, tri-state area. And I also sit on the advisory board of LIU. Okay, so that's my background right there. My organization is in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, and we just formed a new partnership with another youth development organization called Team First. And I'm proud
mm.
to be a part of these organizations. So that's my background. So now when I speak, you know where I'm coming from.
Right
Yeah.
there.
So I and
Okay,
thank
let me ask you, repeat the three T's again.
Yeah, 4 T's.
I mean, the four T's.
It's 4 T's. It stands for teaching teens to think.
Ah, teaching
Okay,
teens to think. Good.
teaching teens to think, right? Because
Uh-huh.
a lot of youth are going to school and they're memorizing their education. They're not thinking for themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
before college, when we knew it back in the days growing up, at least it was a platform or an environment which challenged you to think and think about society and contribute to society, as opposed to now, where all you have to do is memorize and you get your little certificate and stuff like that. And we can see to an extent the outcome that it's having today, where now these institutions are more like businesses as opposed to the value of educating the society. All right, so I'm not even going to get into that's a whole nother topic. We're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
Oh, but one of the things I want to talk about that Cal and I spoke about, and we have the honor and privilege to have in our network a young brother by the name of Akil Bello. And if you check out some of our videos, this guy deals with admissions to colleges. And one
Mhm.
of the things that he brought up, which I thought was so profound, was the difference between a historic HBCU and a PWI. And pretty much in a overall summary, it's a case for us as African Americans, and I hate to use the term minority, but how they classify us. Would you rather go to a college institution that tolerates you or that appreciates you? And that was the
Mm-hmm.
key difference that I didn't have, because I went to a PWI when I went to college. And I saw the drastic contrast in terms of how I was received and how I was taught. Okay, so that I want to bring that up. And like you said, Fred, you know, um, parents and society as a whole are putting too much pressure on the education system to raise children or to raise their children. It says it takes a village to raise a child, and I agree with
Yeah.
that. Right, so it has to be a combination of the home, the parents, the school, and the community. Or in this case, what we have today, after school programs. So I
Mm.
just wanted to bring that up in agreement with you, which is what I'm a part of on the ground. So this is what I want to share with you on that. My experience on the ground with young people, particularly in regards to the education system in and of itself. And I'm glad you brought this up in regards to alternate education, such as trade schools, because what we're noticing is you have a lot of our inner city youth, uh, and the after school program is drastic improvement needs to be
Mhm.
made, because they're just cycling them out. There is a numbers game with them. I'm talking about not only in the education system, but in the after school system. The
Mm.
schools are concerned, they're just pushing these kids out. I mean, they're not even educating them.
Yeah.
It's it's a it's I don't even know the word. I'm trying to struggle with the
It's
word.
appalling, yeah.
It's appalling.
Yeah.
It's disgusting what they're doing to our young people. Okay, and I speak with these young people directly, and they go to school, and they just go to school because their parents go to school, and their parents are really pushing them to go to school, and their parents don't even have a college education. So these young people are being pushed through a system, and they have no guidance whatsoever in how to navigate that system. Even the
Mm.
guidance counselors in the schools are no help to them. And I get it too. I see it from both sides. The guidance counselors have a workload of students, 100, 200 students that they have to guide, and there's no possible way that they can do an effective job. And what's so sad is there's no funding being invested in these school systems to help alleviate that, to help these young people. But I just wanted to bring that to your discussion because there's so much that you talked about, Fred, that we don't have enough time to cover. So I want to encourage our listeners to keep that in mind and to listen to what Fred said in regards to education is important. But I also think it's important that we teach our young people to identify what they do naturally, right? And then when they go to school, be able to see the value of the education and how it relates to their life and how it's going to relate to when they become 18, because we're seeing that as well. So I guess everything what I'm saying, Fred, is please, listeners, those who support us, family, please take those two things in consideration. So I'm gonna jump ahead. With that said, the community raising a child. What do you feel, Fred, is the purpose of family and community, in your words, from your perspective?
Yes, from your generational perspective.
Without sounding pietistic, it's salvation, it's respect, it's dignity, it provides and creates a sense of creative thinking, analytical thinking. Without the family, not necessarily talking about the traditional family, but I mean that's included. But without the family providing the kind of guidance, the kind of nurturing, the kind of love, the kind of commitment to having members of the family, the children, as well as the extended family members, even the parents. I think children can also nurture their parents and vice versa. I mean, that may sound kind of strange,
No.
but I think the tightness of the family, where we share and we respect and understand that every and each member of the family has something valuable to contribute to the success, the well being, and a sense of satisfaction of what it means to be a human being living in a very unjust, unfair world and society in which we live. My family has always given me that sense and that security of knowing that I am really somebody, and I don't mean that in some kind of clash. It's not a. I mean, it's real. I mean, I have always felt important. I've always felt that I had something to contribute, and that was instilled within my mind, within my heart, not just by my parents saying it to me, but they would also help me to see within myself and help me to see the contributions that I would make, even as a very small child. And when you're talking about think, teach, guide, steer, whatever it is, with the four T's, for an example, that family, in fact, provides those four T's. I think, and without the family structure and without a good, solid, it's unfortunate that too many of our kids today do not have that strong, foundational, firm underpinning and undergirding in their lives. And so, therefore, the risk of them going astray and becoming victims of that which would land them either in prison or without skill sets to have viable employment or to have the aspiration to tap into their brain and to their minds to develop to their max, to their optimum abilities. I think the family structure is equally, if not more important than any other element that we have in the society. When you feel the love of a parent, the love of a cousin, like Kyle, the love of a sister or a brother, you can't substitute that. You cannot substitute the love and the compassion that you can get from your family. We may have our quarrels and our disputes and our disagreements, but in the long run, the bottom line is that you can always count. If that family structure is intact, you can always go back and depend on mom, dad, sister, brother, cousin, whatever. But without it, you're just kind of fumbling through. And a lot of fumbling and end up and result in some really bad situations. So
Damn.
I am a strong advocate for a good, strong family. And I don't mean just the definition of a family being a husband, wife, mother, and father, but you have extended family members. A lot of what we had in our community were kids who came from broken homes, quote, broken homes, unquote,
Mhm.
where other members of the community, the church, the school teachers, as I said earlier, really becomes a part of that family structure that is not paternal or blood family, but it becomes a supportive element within the life of an individual that perhaps would not have the same advantages of some other families that would be very structured, well welded together and bonded. Um, but all I'm saying, the family is so extremely important. And I try to teach my kids. I have my youngest son, Justin, interesting guy. Um, and then I have my youngest daughter. She told me the other day she's almost 35, and Daddy, I still depend on your guidance and on your wisdom, etc. And
Yes.
there are times, no matter how independent they think they are, there's a time, and even in my full adult life, there were times when I needed to have a conversation with my father, a
Mhm.
conversation with my mother, that would go far beyond what I could ever learn from a book. As we maturate through our life journey, we come into situations that we just simply say, "Oh man, this is something that I never expected. How am I going to deal with it? What would your advice be? What would your suggestion be?" And those family values, man, began to come into play, and you
Mhm.
begin to see yourself through these wilderness, these valley journeys. And without the family, I think that without my family, I'll say it for me,
Mhm.
without my family, I think I would have been lost.
Cal, can I need to follow up with this.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a two-part question. And it's gonna tie into Cal what you shared with me just the other day.
Uh-huh.
So uh Fred, what do you think that the state of today's black family is in? I'm saying that to say, from my perspective, today's black family seems to be just destroyed. The conflict that we have between black men and black women, the whole um,
Mhm.
independent women, I don't need no man, all that stuff. I'm not sure if you're aware of it on social media. The divorce rate, 70% of women are filing for divorce. One of the things Cal says, the most rebellious thing you could do is have a family, raise a family. So my first question is, what do you think the state of the black family is today? Is it, strong, intact, or are we like on the fringe, or is it just completely done and over? And then the part two to that question, what Kyle shared with me is, and this is deep, and you're a doctor, so do you, on a spiritual level, do you, stay with me? Do you feel that before we were manifested in human form, we chose who our parents were going to be? So there you go. I had to throw that in there, Kyle,
Of
because
course,
we're on
of
the
course.
topic of family. I wanted to.
Hey, of course.
Well, let me try and answer the first question by saying that I think that it is an unfortunate picture that we see with regard to the fragmentation that's occurring too frequently, too broadly within the Black community. We have too many of our families that are just totally disconnected from one another. Uh, I think we have the unhealthy, in some cases, the unhealthy competitive spirit between male and female. And even though I consider myself as a liberal thinking person, I still believe that there are certain things that men can do better, and there are certain things that women can do better. And I think it's really important that we strive in relationships to be able to determine without fear of being either put down or put up, to say, I can do this a little better than you can, I think, and vice versa. So I think that the fragmentation comes in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's rebellion due to what we have been exposed to. I think that sometimes the family uh, fail to have these traditional family gatherings. For an example, in my family, and I'm trying to answer this, Kai, uh, in a way that it doesn't distort your question, or my answers are not distorting it. But I think traditional celebrations are often not what they were, at least from the time when, and even today. My mother was the matriarch, and my mother and her mother and my father's mother, they somehow pulled the family together in ways that is not happening today. I mean, Cal, even in our family, there is not the kind of, and this is not a negative, I'm just saying that because of mobility, because of the way we are transitory in some ways, if we're spread out. You in New York, I'm in Nashville. We just had death in our family in Pontiac, Michigan, and because many of us are, you know, from a distance could not make it and so forth and so on. But even at that, I saw some of the pictures, and I don't mean to be putting out stuff in the street, but the pictures, Cal, that I saw
Uh-huh.
Tina's going home celebration,
Mhm.
I had to look twice and then had to ask, who is that?
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
whose child was that? So
Yeah.
we've lost that sense of even knowing all of our relatives. Whereas in the past, we used to have annual reunions.
Yeah.
We haven't had a family reunion the way I recall and remember in several years now. And so therefore we're losing out on who our children, I mean our cousins and our uh, relatives are on a spectrum that it used to be close and tight knit.
Yes.
So I agree with you, Kai, that the family has been somehow fragmented, and it's not what it used to be. I don't think we have the richness of the gatherings that would give us an opportunity to play and share with one another. I remember every Sunday, our family, our immediate family, including your parents and Smitty, and before you were born, Kyle, always come together on Sundays or some other day. Sometimes we'd all meet in the park. We had these kind of events, these family events, these gatherings
Mhm.
where we would have discussions about what was going on, what's hurting you today, what did you have to go through this past week, what brought that tear to your eye, what dampened the dream, what's happening. And so we had that sense of interaction with one another, that we kept real close connection that we've kind of lost today. And it's painful. It really is painful to see that happening, and more extreme in some families than it is in some others. So that's the response to your first question.
And let me interject. Fred, let me interject. It's so funny you mention that because, like me growing up, I remember my family would get together in this. This is in the '70s every weekend.
Mm,
At my aunt's house, she would have that would be the gathering spot. Like you said, the immediate family would come in, and I think when we talk about solutions and looking forward and how we can probably reunite the family and bring them back in future generations, I think the common denominator back then was the struggle. We
huh,
needed each other, right?
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
We had to come together because we were getting so beat down with the abuse we were getting on the job and everything. It was that weekend that we looked forward to. Well, my parents and my older generation look forward to, just to let loose and to release and to
Mhm.
relax and get all that aggression and frustration out amongst ourselves, to rebuild ourselves. And then you combine that was a Friday night Friday night into Saturday. 'Cause sometimes they were going to
yeah.
Saturday, but then the Sunday we had the church back then, to
That's
come
right.
together and bring that, and then that gave us the strength to carry through and make it through another week. And that's what kept us together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got technology coming, we got the credit cards coming in. It contributed to that separation, whereas we didn't need each other, the technology and all that. And that's what was, I think, a detriment to what we would have in terms of building a strong family unit and a strong support system. So I just wanted to interject on that with you, Fred. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to that. The neighborhood was different as well.
True.
My family, we were probably separated distance wise no more than, would you say, Kyle, no more than 10 miles.
Yes.
And I mean, that would be the extreme, that would be the maximum. So we had a parameter that we could almost throw a ball and hit the next person's house. Although most of us were renters. I mean, we were renting for a long time, but we all stayed pretty much in the same neighborhood, same community, within a 10-mile radius or less. And this included, you know, our parents and our grandparents, our cousins, etc. And it's a difference today. My youngest son lives almost an hour away from me now. And Deandra, my youngest daughter, she just not just moved, but 3 years ago, 4 years ago, moved. She's closer. All I'm saying is that we have been divided and split by distance, and so we don't have that camaraderie either. And it was easier for us to have those assemblies on a regular weekend occasions. I mean, it could still happen today. I mean, we've got transportation. I mean, we do what we want to do. We go where we want to go. It's just a matter of what's priority. What's demanding more of your attention and time than it used to be. You know, when you're focused on the family. Like you said, Kai, we have the church, we have baseball games, we had swimming, we had, you know, parks and this kind of stuff that sometimes the community itself is so spread out. And I'm not saying that integration is a negative thing, or but it has created somewhat of a divide. For an example, I only know my next door neighbor on either side and across the street. The other neighbors, I mean, I know them by sight. We wave and say hello, but in terms of having an intimate understanding or relationship with them, it just doesn't happen. There's a sense of suspicion because I live in a mixed neighborhood, and I'm not sure who's who anymore. Even though they talk the right talk sometimes, I still have a suspicion about, are they authentic and genuine, especially given the political landscape that we're in today. And I've had some real hard discussions with some of my neighbors in group settings, as we talk about the election, as we talk about even the trials that are going on now, and the at least from my perspective, the kind of corruption that we see that's going on through Trumpism and so forth and so on. And I hope I'm not offending any of your audience, but that's just my belief.
Right.
And I think it's diabolic. I think it's diabolic, and it's a battle against righteous and unrighteous, or good and bad. So anyway, your other question, man, you were talking about.
I'll follow, but I just want to say, see, Cal, we can these conversations don't last an hour, man.
I know that.
You brought us some very valid points in regard. My family, as a matter of fact, they lived in the same. We lived in 250 right there off 8th Avenue, Frederick Douglass Boulevard, and I remember my cousin lived across on that, and those apartments over there. We had family downstairs. My Aunt Rosie lived upstairs. So valid point, Fred. I remember we were all like, and if we didn't live in the same building, we lived like a few blocks away. My granddad lived right up the block. Grandma lived, you know what I mean? So
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You were, and then oh man, sorry, I went at, but I'm gonna stick with the part 2 question. So Cal shared with me in regards, because we're talking about the family unit, we're talking about trauma that's in the family, a lot of stuff I've learned over the years, but that's a whole nother topic. But I wanted to get your perspective, and then Cal, come in with a question, man. I'm sorry, I dominated.
No, this is good.
But Fred, Kyle shared with me that from his JEGNAs and from the programs that the groups that he's in, discussion he's in, that, and this was a surprise to me. I wanted to hear your take on it as an elder. That in the spiritual realm, we decided or chose who our parents were going to be before we came here. We were given a spiritual profile of our mother and father, and we chose, yeah, I want that person to be my mother. I want that person to be my father. And then we came, manifesting, they gave birth. We were here. Their earthly being was somewhat corrupted, or to the degree, for those who were born in families who take advantage of them, and that whole thing. But I just found what Kyle shared with me powerful and deep, and I'm still processing it. I thought that would be an interesting question to pose to you, with your wisdom. What do you think about that? In the spiritual realm, did we choose who our parents were going to be?
Mhm.
I don't think so. I think God chose who our parents would be and who our siblings would be. And I don't necessarily believe in predestination.
Mhm.
But there's a passage in the Bible that talks about before we were even born,
Mm.
God knew, and God had already framed and structured us and connected the child with the parents even before we were born. So in that respect, we had no choice, or at least had no power to select who the parents were. Now, I would say in some cases, we might, after some maturation and some maturity, we might would say, I wish that my parents were so and so or so and so, or would have been this character or that character with this kind of uh, nature or whatever. But that's a very interesting
Yeah.
concept that you
Yes.
posed, Kyle.
Yes.
So let me hear.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Kyle. I had to, man. I
no,
wanted
no,
to...
no, it's okay. No, so it's based off of a belief, African spiritual belief, for what I'm practicing and studying. That it relates to uh spiritual realm energy, and of course we're not humans, like we're spiritual beings having a human experience is what we talk about in my practice and study. So in regard to that, the coming into the physical realm, coming into this realm, we all have a certain purpose. We are all here for a reason, as they say. Some people call it purpose, some people call it an assignment, but we are here for a reason. There's no accidents. So it ties into regards to that there are really no accidents in the sense of who we come through, who what type of parents we have, what type of experience we have, is all in alignment of helping us to become the better version of ourselves. So it comes out of that. Um, and some people say, hey, we choose who we come through, as far as the vessel, through our parents, through that lineage, through that heritage, and it's kind of it's out of that dynamic, that paradigm of belief, that we choose who we come through, and it's a choice. Again, it doesn't necessarily to say that we know exactly why. No, but that's all part of the living of being here, is the fact that we live out our dreams, we live out our role that we play in the greater world of things.
That's a very complex.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I didn't know that African
That's
tradition. I didn't know that came from an African heritage.
Yes.
And I'd really like to see something that I could also
Yes. Yes, I can definitely
be
share.
exposed to. Because from a spiritual perspective, as I said a moment ago, I think, and this is not to say predestination is what I'm, embracing. I'm just simply
Mhm.
saying that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around me choosing my mother and father
Mhm.
rather than coming through a biological um, way by which we know that birth occurs,
Mhm.
and that I had nothing to do with my parents being who they are, or my choosing of them to be my parents, or for me
Mhm.
to have chosen to be their child. So it's very difficult. It's a very complex um, subject for me at this point because I'm just not aware of it.
Mhm.
And I'd like to get some exposure to
Indeed. Indeed.
And with that said, now we're gonna tie and Kyle coming with the next question. What
Uh-huh.
led you, Fred, to the ministry?
because I had to bring you in, man. Because that was a good question spiritually, and you're in the ministry. Yeah, I appreciate your ministry, brother. I appreciate spiritual and all that. What led you to the
Yeah.
ministry, Fred?
I think there were a lot of factors that led me to the ministry, and because the time is running out, I'll just kind of
Mm.
drill right down.
Mhm.
I think I've always been a very sensitive kind of individual. God has gifted me with some very strong gifts of being able to organize, to be able to relate to a variety of different kind of people and mentalities. Have always been one that would reach out with love and care, I hope. But the thing that really solidified my call to ministry was during the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. I was very active in the movement here in Nashville, sitting at lunch counters and picketed and so forth and marched. But I used to cry, and I still have the Bible that I was so very close to, and had tear stains, and still have this tear stains on the pages when I would see so much suffering and so much violence and so much hatred that was so counter to what I was being taught in
Mhm.
Sunday school and in my home, and it was just so painful. And I was asking God, why is it happening? I mean, I used to have some real heavy conversations with the Lord about how could God of grace and mercy and justice allow so much deprivation, so much indignities being imposed upon at least particularly our people.
Mhm.
Some of the situations that I saw my mother and father having to go through as domestic workers, and the embarrassment and the dehumidifying of their characters by their white employers.
Mhm.
But the point that I'm making, violence, injustice, and the kind of deprivation that we had to go through as a people is what called me or solidified my call to ministry. I wanted to be a part of correcting and reversing that trend. And the platform that I eventually saw to do that was through the church and through the pulpit. So I tried to go back and not only have the experiential side, but I wanted to have formal education and learning. I wanted to have these arguments with God
Mhm.
about my feelings and my anger and my disappointment, and to work through all of that, navigating through all of these complexities of what it means to be a human being in the midst of so much suffering and so much what I thought was unjust. So it was the pain and the hurt that I saw people going through that I think solidified my ministry. There were other factors, but I'm not going to go through all of them. But that was a major one. And at some point, I'd love to share a story with you that will be with me for the rest of my life in terms of my ministry.
Part
Mm.
two. That'd be the part two, Cal. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
to be
Cal. I'm
part
sorry, I
two.
dominated the question.
Yeah, no, not at all. But no, because I appreciate that sharing with me, and definitely, I definitely love to share with you, that spiritual dynamic, that we can definitely discuss. Because I'm always open. I'm never closed off, and that's attuned to our family, being, forever learners, and we appreciate that. So my question is, in regards to, tying into the ministry and tying into the civil rights movement, we hear about these things about civil rights movement, especially growing up in Nashville. They really kept us away. They really subjected us to really just basic education. They've really pushed it to the side and really quieted a lot of the things that you all sacrificed and had to go through in the civil rights era, because Nashville was a key city
Yeah.
in the development and the proliferation of the civil rights movement. But that's something that I had to appreciate as I got older, leaving the city and then coming back and then learning these things. So my question is, you being in the civil rights movement, how did it change you? And you mentioned that some of it already, but also what are some of the things that you would like my generation to know, or future generations to know, that they don't really promote in reference to the civil rights movement? Because a lot of people look at it as, well, it was Dr. King, it was SNCC, it was NAACP, and that's it. And you all tried to integrate counters, and that's it. And what good did it do? You know, so what are some of the things that you can relate to us that was beneficial for you, but also beneficial for what came out of?
So many benefits. I'll start with the physical reality of being beaten, cigarette burns by police officers. A classmate of mine was murdered by the police. The arcade there in Nashville, as you between 4th and 5th Avenue, we were demonstrating one evening, and we I mean, the police were coming in, just coming in on us like crazy. And the arcade, Kai, if you don't know what that is, but there were steps, and we had to go upstairs, and we were trying. My classmate and I were escaping from the police beatings, and I somehow, by the grace of God, did escape, but he did not. They threw him over the balcony and crushed his head, his skull, and never did we have any kind of adjudication on the kind of violence that this police officer or police officers perpetrated against my classmate. I don't know how I ever got beyond what it meant to be one that would give another person that had been so cruel some kind of benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. Something that came over me, and it's kind of related to my ministry too, because at the time I was ready to kill without any regret or without any remorse. And you may even be able to tell it in the tone of my voice, even right now, the emotions of even thinking about that experience. That's only one out of several. So the experience of the civil rights movement, and I think, helped me to overcome the weakness of carrying the burdens of sin and harboring vindictive, malicious acts on my part toward another individual, another human being, which was very difficult to do. And I guess as we are in the Lenten season, and I ask myself the question, how did Jesus, as a Christian now, I'm speaking, how did Jesus endure the kind of betrayal, the kind of lies, the kind of torture, the kind of dehumanization that he had to go through? And then the last words that we know, according to the scripture, was forgive them. And that's as a Black Christian, the most difficult and the most stressful, the most craziest thing, the paradox. How do you forgive? The civil rights movement taught me that forgiveness and reconciliation and peace can happen. We still have a hell of a long ways to go, but we've made some strides. And for me personally, it enabled me to get beyond the frailty of holding and harboring. I'm not saying that I don't still, hold those things, but I'm just simply saying these were lessons because we had these prayer visuals every night, and these were serious moments where we would have to learn how to expose our bodies to the risk of being killed for a cause that was bigger than any one of us. It was a collective group decision that we had made that would change the world, that would change the society, that would change the mindset of people who were acting out of evil intentions and so forth. There were a lot of lessons learned. The endurance. How does the individual endure? It's not only the spiritual, but the physical stuff. You set your mind to having someone to beat on your body and not to retaliate. That was a hell of a thing to do. Yes, it still is. But yet, we had to reinforce with one another. Keep you cool, be calm, uh, know what to do, what not to do when you are confronted by these evil attacks. So those were great lessons. It also taught me that white men, particularly, could become a friend. During the civil rights movement, there were one incident. I'll tell you this real quick. There was this one big bearish kind of a white guy who was on the line where violence was occurring, and he was perpetrating it. There was a group called the Promise Keepers. And the Promise Keepers, which was an organization, it was a male men movement. I don't know whether you heard of it or not.
I've never heard of this. Yeah, Promise
I've
Keepers.
heard of it.
It was a conservative white Christian movement. I was working for an organization when they had an event here in Nashville, and it was such a coincidence. The same guy that I had selected, that I was going to take his head off as a result of him burning cigarette butts on the necks and the back of us who were protesting. At one of these conventions, which was a very white, conservative, evangelical type group, this same guy was in this group. Somehow our eyes met and we recognized one another. This man came up to me. There was always an invitation for anyone who wanted to renew their life. He came up to me and says, "Please go to the altar with me. I've got a confession to make." This big old bearish man grabbed me, wouldn't let me go, literally.
Wow.
Until I went to the altar with him, and he cried, begging me to forgive him for the cruelty, for the disrespect, for the dehumanizing way by which he engaged in. It was a miracle. It was a lesson that one of the many lessons that I learned as a part of the movement, as a part of being a nonviolent participant who was trying to make a change, who was trying to bring about justice and equality and equity and reciprocity. Here's a white man that I hated and wanted to take his head off, who came and embraced me and made me go to the altar and wouldn't let me go until I said, "I forgive you."
Wow.
I this crossed my mind, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm being led to ask this question. How did the George Floyd
Mm.
impact you? Having been a
Great
part of
question.
the civil rights movement, to me, it was a mirror image. It was like this happened in the 60s, and here we are in 2000s, and it looks like the exact same thing. How
Yeah.
did you, Fred, how, what, what, what was that like for you?
Oh man. Um, I was overwhelmed by that act of blatant racist act on the part of the system that's supposed to protect you. Here was an innocent man crying out to his mother, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And police officers. I was overwhelmed. I mean, it threw me back, as you said, Kai, to the civil rights movement in my era. I mean, it was no different. In fact, it could, in some respect, you could see that as being worse because we had come through so much, and we thought that we had achieved a level of decency, a level of respect mutually. That was just not the case. And you could multiply George Floyd's situation across the country, across the globe. How Blacks and how people of color are still to this day treated as if they are something less than. and do not deserve the treatment of a decent human being. So it was just it was mind-boggling, and it still it was mind-boggling. It was painful. It was saddening. It was disheartening. It was all of those adjectives, man, that I could just go on and on and on. But it took me back to the time that when I told you that what solidified my call to ministry
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
was the hatred and the violence. And I just could hear it and feel it and see it again. That tears, not on the same Bible, but on other Bibles and upon I mean, it was tear jerking.
Mhm.
It was
Thank you, Fred. And Kyle, come on with the quick because we're closing
Definitely.
out. I know I'm telling you that's how these conversations go. But
Yes,
on
yes,
this
no, and
topic, Fred, I want to thank you so much because um, you mentioned spirituality with
mhm,
regards to the community and young people growing up, and I have to say that if without the grace of God, man, without His grace, none of us would make it. And I can say
mhm,
right.
personally that that's an integral part of who we are. And I'm sorry that we as a humanity has gotten away from that, who our source is. So I want to
mhm,
thank you so much for sharing that and your spiritual presence, bringing that to this discussion,
mhm,
because all glory, honor, and praise given to our Creator, whatever we want to call him, whatever title.
Yeah.
Because
mhm.
without him, I firmly believe, and this is just me, my opinion, but without him, I wouldn't have made it. I would not have made it. So thank
Amen.
you, Fred. God bless you. Thank you.
Bless
I'm
you.
sorry, Cal. Go ahead, man.
Indeed, indeed. No, I concur. Faith system, whatever you choose to believe in, I know that there's a force that's greater than me. That's without a fact. And Grand Rising Collective, we stand on that. We definitely know we cannot do it alone. Physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, we
Right.
cannot do it alone. So, I definitely give respect and credit where credit is due. I did not create myself. That I know for a fact. All right. And because I want to appreciate you sharing that with us because as Black men, and this is going to lead into one of my questions is as Black men, we have a very difficult, challenging time being vulnerable in today's society. And I know you being a minister, you've seen many different people come to you from different walks of life, different ethnicities. And in regard to being a Black Christian, as you said, has a different connotation, a different lens on seeing things a certain way. And a question I want to ask is, in reference of having faith and with Black men, how can we better support each other? Because there's a lot of mental health and a lot of mental issues going on, and we've all suffered some type of trauma, as Kayode mentioned earlier. From your perspective and from your wisdom, what are some things that we can do to help relieve some of that mental illness and mental issues that we're having as Black men and as a Black community?
Yeah, my response is not to be patronizing, but I think that what you and Kai are doing now with the podcast, that's number one, is to have an opportunity and open discussion about the reality of experiences that we have that are different and
Mhm,
how we can help. My generation can help your generation by just being in dialogue and being in conversation. And it doesn't have to always be a big thing, it could be a one on one. I might see a young man in my neighborhood, as I said about tutoring a moment ago.
mhm,
It may be that we intentionally begin to think about how can we begin to have conversations, dialogue. How can we have more frequent, and I don't mean churchy, but I mean just some really hard, open ended conversations about life experiences,
mhm,
how we see it, how we made it through, what were the issues that affected me most in life. What are my hopes and dreams even now at the age that I am at 80? I still have hopes and dreams.
mhm.
What does it mean to be an 80-year-old living in a society that's still corrupt?
Yes.
To discuss that with a younger generation, how I got through my time of Jim Crow and
Mhm,
segregation. How did I get through and struggle through not having the opportunity of having the same kind of pay scale that my counterparts would have, et cetera, on and on and on.
mhm.
I just think conversation and interaction is the way to do that. There may be other formal ways to do that, like with the 4 T's. I mean, that's an organization that's tapping into the mind. How do you think about what your future is going to be from the 18-year-olds up? And then we could start even earlier than that.
Yes.
Have pockets and networks and community groups that would really intentionally do that on a consistent basis, frequency basis. I mean, we can do it over the telephone. We can write letters to one another. We can express our feelings both through phone, through media, through letter writing. Uh, we can have annual events that wouldn't be so expensive. We're gonna gather on such and such date during Black History Month or any other month, as you said, Cal, earlier. Every
Right.
month is History Month.
Right.
But when I'm in New York, for example, do we get together as a team and your 4 T's and Cal, your group where you're studying stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exposed to, let's begin to share that in a much more formal, much more consistent, way.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Sounds like a plan, cuz. Sounds like a plan. Because that's
By the way,
something.
Cal, I passed it there at 125th and Madison Avenue, just to give you kind of a geographical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, I know that area well. Yeah, I know the area well. Area well.
So a
Definitely.
lot of stuff there, man.
A lot, a lot, a lot. Always happening. Always stuff going on. Always stuff going on. So I know we're getting near the end, and I want to definitely ask one more question because I love the response because I talk about it all the time that we don't communicate enough, the generations, the multi-generations. And I think this one a few times, I think I mentioned it to you when we talked last, was like this the one of the first times we have like 4 generations, 4 or 5 generations all alive at one time.
Yeah,
So it would be advantageous for us to be able to take advantage of, like you said, the wisdom and the experience of learning from each other because, I mean, that's that when we talk about generational wealth family, we also talking about generational wisdom too. And that
right,
wealth comes from wisdom. You can't have wealth without wisdom. It
right.
doesn't work because if you do have so-called financial wealth, it's not going to last
Yeah,
because it takes somebody knowing more so than you to be able to share that with you, to share those resources with you in order to create that generational wealth.
that's
So,
right,
wealth is not just of the material gain and the financial gain, but is it the spiritual,. Mental. So
right.
I just want to hone that in on the listeners to say, look, my cuz who's, up in age, but he's young at heart. So he's a youngin,
I thought he was 60, Cal.
yeah, I
I
know,
did
right?
not know he was 8.
I know, right? And I think that it goes without saying that, I celebrate you and I appreciate you because like you said, you've been through Jim
Definitely.
Crow, you've been through civil rights movement, you've been through the so-called Black Power era, you've been through Reaganomics, you've been through what else? The um so many historical events that have happened in your lifetime, that and you're still here, you're still
Yeah.
sane, you're still doing the work, like you're
Yeah.
still faithful. Like that in itself is an achievement and family. If you're talking about being a success, to me, that's success. That's success. And I just appreciate you because I really do love you and
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Same here.
Back at you, bro.
Yeah. 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 So my last question for me is in regard to living with purpose. With as I mentioned earlier, living with purpose. How can we be more intentional in our lives about living with purpose?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to have an objective. What are your goals? For me, my objective goals have always been how can I contribute not only to my family but the extended family and the broader community, and how do I go about doing that? As I mentioned earlier about the nurturing that I got from my elders in the community in which I grew up, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, cousins, and so forth, would always have a hand in my life. I think that my purpose, even today, is to still provide the kind of manifestation and the examples that points toward high values and morals, with a sense of achievement, knowing that you are really important, equally important, if not more important than everybody else or anything, that we have to continue to help people to understand that they are creatures of the divine. They were made in the image of the divine, and nobody can really take that away from you. We're all different. We're all different, but we're all equal importance in the sight of our divine creator, whoever and whatever that is. And we must emphasize that to those, especially who are on the margins and feel like that they are nothing, that they have no values to offer, uh, help to instill within them, you do. And that the purpose for me is to help the other party to maximize and to optimize their greatest ability to be the best they can be. And that's what I want to do. I mean, even in this interchange, this discussion, this conversation, I hope that I've said something that would be of value, that would be of encouragement, that would be inspirational, aspirational, for each other, for one another, and for the audience as well. So my purpose is to always try and uplift um, those that are feeling on the margins.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you so much. My final question before we close it out, and again, Fred, Dr. Allen, I know I'm being formal with it, but thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned before, I deal with a lot of young people, right? I mentor a lot of young people, guiding them, teaching them to think. And when you mention family and how important family is in the support system, what advice could you give to a young person who feels that they don't have that type of family, or the family that they are in doesn't appreciate them, doesn't support them, doesn't pour into them? In fact, they do just the opposite. They belittle them, they take advantage of them, they abuse them. If we have a young person listening in and they're seeking that guidance, and as a minister, I know you on point and your spirit is already manifested to them, but verbally, what would you say, or what advice could you give to a young person who's experiencing that?
I think the first thing that I would remind them, again, I'm being repetitive here, um, their faith position or their faith may not have the same understanding of a faith in a God, of a creator. I would try and say that there is a divine, there's a higher source and a being that brought all of this to fruition. You are part of that magnificent, glorious, creative reality, that you are who you are and have been created in the image of something much better and bigger and stronger and smarter and wiser than any of us. And yet we have the attributes that's been imposed or given to us. And you need to look in the mirror and see the image of which you have been made, and to begin to claim that, hold it dearly, and to get out of that entrapped bag of thinking that you are not as good or better than the next, and that you can reach heights that are far beyond what you see today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's it. Before we go, Fred, uh, please share with our viewers, subscribers, and then how if they wanted to reach you. And Cal, this man, this your cousin. Do that, man. Yeah, brother.
Indeed, no. Family, we appreciate you for being with us on this uh enriching discussion. This is my family, but this is we all family in the scheme of things. And I want him to bring on the platform because, again, when we talk about multiple generations, they have a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight to share. And it's to our benefit to ask them and to have these conversations as much as possible because, we all have things to share with each other anyway, but he's been our age before we've been our age. So it's like, so, it just makes sense to be able to unpack and unlock these jewels and gems that they have to share with us. So cuz if you could, like, please give us your contact info, how people can contact you if they want to reach out to you, so that way they can ask you any more questions or, just kind of get your insight on some things if you'd be
Sure.
fine.
Sure. My email address is f Allen Power at att.net. It's fallen at att.net.
And they can reach you there at the email.
Yes.
Okay. And definitely, you note family, just don't be random. Say, hey, I heard you on the Grand Rising Collective podcast. We don't need no randomness going on here, right?
Right.
Community, a tight community, where we, again, respectful and everything like that. So again, I'm sure if he doesn't get right back to you, people are busy, even though he's retired, he's still doing his thing, living in his purpose. So
Yeah.
there's never enough, so but yeah, family, we appreciate you all, because I appreciate you, love you for coming on the platform.
Absolutely.
Spending the time with us,
Yes.
because you didn't have to do that, but I always appreciate it and don't take it for granted,
Thank you.
Indeed.
It's mutual. I've appreciated it and have enjoyed sharing in this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Fred. Any before we close out, we do like we said, the 3, 2, 1. That's what we covered up in that. Do you have you already shared the advice for young people who are struggling? Do you have any just general summary final words that you would like to share with us and the audience? Any final words?
Yeah.
I would just simply say that I think that it's wise that we have this kind of platform. And even if it's not this podcast, you can create your own small group settings to keep the conversation going. Recognize that you've got elders within your own family structure. If not in your nuclear family, you've got them out there. Engage with them as well, similar to what we've done tonight, and that this is not going to be the end of it. Keep it going.
Yes, definitely will. Definitely will. And I know, family, like, share, subscribe to the platform, because I know some of you all are listening, but y'all not subscribing. So, make sure you subscribe, make sure you put the likes, check the likes, hit the share it to your friends, your family, and we'll definitely have some more on this note. Again, we take donations. As I said, we'll take the kind that jingles, but we rather take the kind that folds. Yes.
You always get me with that one.
So on that note, Kayode, what we
We're
doing?
gonna do the 3, 2, 1. Thank you all for listening. We have some more guests coming up. We're gonna share and keep sharing with you all to uplift the community. So on the count of 3, 2, 1, we're gonna do our peace sign. 3, 2, 1. Peace.